Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today on launching the Niagara Community Foundation Center of Excellence in Nonprofit Governance. My name is Sarah Webster and I'm with Niagara Connects, who's hosting the webinar today. While I give you a quick overview of the technology and what our time is going to look like during the hour that we have together today, I'm going to pull a poll up on the screen in front of you asking how many participating in today's webinar from your computer, recognizing we have some people joining in groups, wondering how many people in your room sit on a board of directors. So please take a minute and use your keyboard to type in an answer as I'm talking here. You'll notice that if you've come on the line and you've said hello and we're not answering, all of the participant lines are muted during the presentation time for our call, and that just helps us cut down on some of the inevitable background noise of fire alarms and dogs barking. And it also allows those that are joining in groups to have conversations without it interrupting the presentation itself. The presentation itself is also being recorded. We record all of our webinars with Niagara Connects, and that recording will be made available online within about a week, and we'll send you a follow-up communication letting you know that it's up and available and how to access that, as well as provide a link to access the slides from today, as well as any additional resources related to the content of the presentation. Other than that, the chat pod down the left-hand side of your screen can be used to ask any questions that you have during the presentation. We'll hear from our presenters for about 40 minutes or so, and then we'll open up the lines for some discussion. And we'll certainly, so please do, if you have a question during the presentation, use the chat pod to type it in, and we'll keep an eye on that, and then certainly address them during that last discussion part of the presentation today. So it looks like, based on the poll, that we do have lots of people that are joining who do sit on different boards, and sometimes more than one, which is great to see. And certainly for those that sit on boards or have boards of directors, there's going to be lots to cover in this presentation that will kind of, I think, hit the mark with lots of different people. So today we do have Liz Palmieri and Joanne Crick from the Niagara Community Foundation, who will talk about the new Center of Excellence, as well as Mary Wiley and myself from Niagara Connects, who will give you a little bit of some information about Niagara Connects' role in helping to support the new center. So I'll turn it over now to Liz to take us away with the agenda.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year to everybody. I know it's 20 days into the new year. It's hard to believe that in 10 days it will be February. My, how time flies. We're really excited to be participating with Niagara Connects in the presentation of the webinar today. So you'll see in front of you the agenda. There are 5 items that we want to cover. First, why we wanted to create this Center of Excellence in Nonprofit Governance, a quick review of the vision, mission, and guiding principles, talk about a new program that we are launching called the Governance Partners Program, also talk about different grants that will be available for governance and governance resources. So the big question is, why a Center of Excellence? What we observe certainly is that governance of the nonprofit sector continues to be a challenge, and problems tend to be cyclical, with changing leadership both from the staff and a board perspective. We've also observed that professional development training is available, but from a variety of providers and from the sector's perspective, sometimes hard to source. Certainly budgets for professional development and organizational development tend to be limited. Organizations are aware that they need help but don't have the time, the expertise, nor the financial resources to address governance issues. And what we observe certainly are there are lots of opportunities to learn from, link to, and work with existing successful governance-related programs and resources, many of which are online. Many of you know that certainly the Foundation has been funding capacity building grants since we started in 2001. That criteria has sort of been fundamental to most of our grants. And we believe that by creating a Center of Excellence, we would be able to provide other opportunities besides money to support capacity building within the sector. And one thing that's not on there is certainly with the increased legislation and regulations governing charities, it's really important that the risks to charities for complying are mitigated through good governance, checks, and balances. So the vision for the center, a stronger nonprofit sector in Niagara. I mean, that's certainly something that we've supported since the get-go. It's been in our DNA since we launched in 2001. But what we're doing now is doing a focused approach with the Center of Excellence. We want to really raise the bar across Niagara. The mission that you see in there, and I'm not going to read it to you, but it's we are a federally incorporated nonprofit corporation. And there was new legislation that was enacted, and we actually, for all federally incorporated nonprofits, we had to file articles of continuance. And we took that opportunity to actually expand our charitable purposes. And included in our new charitable purposes is, in fact, this mission to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our charities by providing financial support, advice, and capacity building to foster environmental, social, cultural, and economic sustainability in the community. We strongly believe that charities need a strong and solid core to continue to deliver the best programs and services that you can. In terms of the guiding principles, we spent some time looking at these. When I first started in the sector many years ago, I could never understand why you needed guiding principles, but what I've come to learn is they really help to frame decision-making moving forward. We want our programs, anything that we looked at implementing as part of the center, to be relevant based on identified needs, not on what we perceived as needed. We wanted whatever we did to be enabling so that we could provide programs, services, and funding to enable organizations to become stronger and more effective. We believe in collaboration, so certainly finding ways to leverage partnership opportunities and existing Canadian resources. Anything that we do, we really wanted it to be a shared responsibility, that organizations accessing programs and services commit to putting skin in the game with either time, staff, and or their own financial resources. Certainly anything that we did needs to be multi-sector. The programs can be used by organizations working in any sector. What we do, we want it to be impactful, and we're still kind of working on this, but certainly so that we can measure the impact of the Center of Excellence in a meaningful way. Otherwise, how will we know that we are having an impact? We're trying to be efficient, so any of the processes that we are going to be using to access the programs and services will be lean and focused and clear. We want to be responsive to the emerging needs and issues, especially those relating to governance. Demonstrated expertise was really critical, especially with respect to programs, personnel, and services being delivered. And whatever we do, we want it to be sustainable. So we didn't want to start anything that we couldn't continue. So the Governance Partners Program, I should let you know first before actually talking about this, there are actually 6 components to the Center of Excellence. And we're going to be describing most of these today. The first of which is a new program that we are implementing called the Governance Partners Program. This program is a result of us looking across North America to see what community foundations were doing beyond grant making and endowment building to strengthen the sector. And so our Governance Partners Program is based on a similar program called the Investing in the Incredible, offered by the Gulf Coast Community Foundation in Florida. When we were developing this program, I actually offered to go do a site visit, but there wasn't anybody uptake. My board didn't quite approve that one. However, we did test the viability and the need and the interest of our version of their program during the summer and fall of 2014. Through the Governance Partners Program, the first step is to go to our website to review and complete a governance gap analysis tool. This is a free resource, and it's based on the Imagine Canada standards. We were really interested in using Canadian-based resources. There are actually 3 versions of the standards, depending on the size of the organization, the number of staff, the budget that you have. And the tool is available in 2 different formats: Excel, which you can access, download on your computer, and then complete, or you can do SurveyMonkey. When we've been testing both, we actually like the Excel version because the report, once you've completed the survey, is available to you right away. With the SurveyMonkey, you can complete it, but you actually have to connect with the foundation to get a copy back. the survey, the gap analysis tool is organized in 5 or 6 areas, and I'll explain those in a minute. The report that is produced will outline the gaps and priorities. And at this point, once the report's produced, the charity, the completing it, has actually 2 choices. You could either use your own internal resources, a governance committee, an ad hoc committee, to address the gaps and priorities, or the charity could connect with our Governance Partners Program Coordinator, who would work with the charity to prepare a work plan utilizing one of our governance consultants to address the gaps and priorities. And in this case, the foundation would provide a grant to co-fund the cost of the consultant up to 50%. There are 5 functional areas in the standards. They're listed there. The board governance, there are actually 19 standards. An example of a couple are the board has a strategic plan in place. The board has a conflict of interest policy in place. In terms of the financial accountability and transparency, there are 13 standards. A couple of examples are the organization's financial statements must be approved by the board within 6 months of fiscal year end. Or another one is the board receives assurance from management at least twice a year that all statutory remittances have been made. And those relate to payments for your income tax remittances, Canada pension, workers' comp, those types of things, because the board is ultimately responsible for ensuring that those things have been paid. In fundraising, there are 14 standards, and a couple of examples are any fundraising materials distributed by the organization must include address or contact information. Some of these sound pretty basic, but it's really quite interesting when you go through and look at the standards to see and you review them against what your agency has in place to see, in fact, what you do or do not have. Another example of a fundraising standard is the organization does not directly or indirectly pay finder's fees, commissions, or percentage compensation based on the contributions. In terms of the staff management, there are 8 standards, a couple of which are the organization has written HR management policies that comply at minimum with employment, health and safety, and other applicable legislation. And in terms of volunteer involvement, there are 7 standards, one of which is the contributions of volunteers are acknowledged and recognized, or the organization has appropriate screening processes for volunteers. Now, the gap analysis tool, for each of the standards, there's sort of 2 questions that you can answer. One is, it talks about how your organization is doing. So this is really scientific. You would click on, we have or do this, we have this or do this but need some help, or we do not have or do this. And then the next question relates to priority. High priority, mid priority, low priority, or it doesn't apply to us. We're using the Imagine Canada standards, and as I mentioned earlier, what we found is there was a good cross-section of governance standards regardless of what sector or industry that you are in. We, actually the week after next, Imagine Canada is doing a standards coach training program, and we will have 4 consultants go through that program. The consultants are all either current or former executive directors from Niagara who have been managing very well-governed organizations. The other thing that's really key is really needs to be a shared responsibility of the board and staff. And certainly anybody participating in the Governance Partners program where they want to work with one of our consultants, it's really important that the board and the staff are involved in this. I've already talked about you can use either the Imagine Canada consultant or your internal resources. And we will do the grant at 50% of the cost of the consultant. The hourly rate for the consultant is $100 an hour. So we would subsidize that by 50%. I'm now going to pass it over to Joanne Crick from our office, who's going to talk about the grants that we do and some changes in our current granting program. Jo.
Thank you, Liz. I currently manage the grant program here at the Niagara Community Foundation. And what I'll do today is speak to the governance program as it relates to our discretionary grants program. So those are the grants that you have applied to us for. I know I've spoken to several of you and that you have applied to our grants program either through community grants, mini grants, summer camp grants, or environmental grants. Today we'll talk about some of the priorities with respect to community and mini grants. We will continue to have two priorities for this grant stream. One will continue to be support projects that address the Living in Niagara report. And number two will continue to be our capacity building grants. So those grants will continue to support the following that you'll see on your screen. Professional development, including staff training, board training, volunteer training. Also, organizational development. So we'll continue to support projects that are looking for support for strategic planning, marketing plan development, website development, human resources policy development, and accreditation processes. We also will continue to provide grants here in Niagara, but we're also now asking you to complete a governance standards checklist. So we have pulled together 13 governance standards, and they will be on the community grant application when you're applying. All these grant applications will now be done online, but really important to remember that the first time that you're applying to NCF and taking part in the standards checklist, everybody will be allowed to go through. It is after that your first application that you will be required to have 8 of the 13 standards in place. So I want to get into the 13 standards, but first we'll do another poll question here. The first one of the standards questions is, does your board approve your organization's annual budget? So I'll give you a second or two to answer that. Sarah, maybe you want to tell me a good time to skip to results?
Yeah, it looks like people are still answering here, but we've had 80 people say yes and only 1 say no.
Oh, excellent.
All right, you should be good to go on. I think
Great.
that tells us a lot about who's on the phone today.
That's for sure. So, I think number 1 of 13 is a really good example of some really basic but fundamental standards that we are asking when you're applying to our grants program. So that was number 1. Number 2, does your board review actual to budget at least twice a year with respect to your financials? So why do we think this is important? Well, the board has the ultimate responsibility to its members, and these periodic reviews will keep the board informed of progress to date versus, finding out at the end of a fiscal year that there are some issues. And where you're seeing an asterisk, those are the standards that are going to be required every time you apply. Next, does your board meet a minimum of 3 times annually? Again, board having the ultimate fiduciary responsibility to the members, CRA, and other governing bodies. We truly feel this is very important. Again, it's one of the required standards. Next, are board policies reviewed at least every 4 years? So we also think this is important. It's important to determine if your policies are still relevant. And with any of the 13 today, please know there's supports, resources available on our website to help you guide through this process with any of these standards. Next, is there a policy that clearly outlines the roles and responsibilities of the board and officers? Clearly defined roles and responsibility are so critical to good governance. and that they help board members understand the difference between their roles as directors and the roles of staff. Next, are there fixed terms for board members? There have been some instances where there's some negative consequences with boards who may be stuck in their ways, resist change. It could minimize the opportunity for new board members to come on board, so we think those are important. Has a strategic plan been developed in the last 4 years? So a good strategic plan, it will focus all the energy and the resources and the time of the individuals at the organization all in the same direction. And as we mentioned a few slides earlier, that we do have support in place to help organizations who are going through the strategic planning process. Next, does the board annually review progress on achieving strategic plan goals and adjust plans to reflect progress and new opportunities? We feel that regular reviews take into account changing trends, opportunities, issues, and challenges, and this will really help keep your work current and relevant, because this is in fact a living document. Next, for a standard, does the board annually review progress? Oh, I read that one, sorry. Is the ED/CEO performance reviewed annually? So performance appraisal gives both the board and the executive director the opportunity to review the executive director's goals and outcomes for the past year and to set objectives for the upcoming year.
Joe, if I could just interrupt at a moment here.
Yep.
We realize, and you'll see that this is sort of a mandatory one. We believe that this is going to be a challenge for organizations because quite often the ED review is kind of left off the table. What we think that we would like to implement this year is actually some professional development around performance reviews for executive directors and CEOs. So stay tuned for that. Sorry, Joe.
No, thank you. Next, the board evaluation is undertaken annually. So this ensures the board has the knowledge, skills, and ability to govern. They can contribute significantly to performance on a number of levels, organizationally, individually, etc. Next, is there an interim succession plan in place or being developed in the unexpected changeover in organizational leadership? So why this is important? Well, you can't plan for disaster, sudden illness, or other emergencies. It's so important to put in place a plan that helps your organization continue to operate. It can be used to build strong leadership and help your organization survive the daily changes in the marketplace. Next standard, is there a conflict of interest policy? So unfortunately, organizations are sometimes subject to scrutiny, especially when they appear to have inappropriately benefited from officers, directors, or trustees. A conflict of interest policy will help avoid the appearance or the actuality of any benefits to an individual in a position of authority. So very important. Next, is there a reserve policy? So the reserve policy addresses the need for working capital and to meet the unexpected spending requirements, perhaps because the organization has fallen short or plans have been delayed or project costs have gone up. Capital reserves are important for organizations that own property and facilities. So there are going to be some resources, tips, and tools on our website to help with that. So I'm just going to go back one slide. I think I just went too many forward. There.
That's okay. Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah, so in conclusion, A lot of the process will be the same. You are required to call NCF prior to applying to any of our discretionary grants program. That is the same as before. That way we can determine eligibility of the project you're applying for. At that time, I'll be able to provide you with your ID number that you will need to complete the application. And included right on the application form itself is the 13-point governance standards checklist. So remember, even if you currently don't have all 8 of the required standards, you can apply once, and we can direct you to some really great resources, tools, and tips, and help your organization move the dial on some of those items. And for those on the line today hoping to apply to our next round of grants, we do have a 2016 community grant that will be due on Monday, February 29th. And I do look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. And I think we're going to turn it over to Mary now to talk to us a little bit about Niagara Connects.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks, Liz and Joanne. We're really pleased to be working with the Community Foundation to make this webinar possible. And so just to put a little context around where you can find some of the those relevant, reliable resources to support your quest for information around the themes that Liz and Joanne have just talked about. So to support the Center of Excellence, there are some resources that are available on the Niagara Knowledge Exchange. So just to provide a little bit of context before we get into the specifics of how to find the information, many of you who are on participating today will know that Niagara Connects is built from the ground up by the community. We're a network, a Niagara-wide network of people for collaboration, planning, learning, innovation, and community action toward a stronger future for Niagara. And our mission is generating knowledge that drives community action. So one of the main things we do is facilitate knowledge tools on behalf of the Niagara-wide community. And the Niagara Community Foundation is an active partner in building the Niagara Connects network over the past 10 years, a main supporter of the community's work together to build the Living in Niagara report, which is every 3 years. It's a triennial measure of quality of life in Niagara based on the 12 Living in Niagara sectors that the community described as its way to gather its information about quality of life so we can measure where we've been, where we're going. And also a major supporter of producing that report and the Niagara Knowledge Exchange. So just to be clear, Niagara Connects has 3 online presence areas. So our main site is niagaraconnects.ca, which is the one you see at the top of the slide. And then there's also a website which is for the Living in Niagara report. That's livinginniagarareport.com. And then the third one is niagaraknowledgeexchange.com. So the Living in Niagara report is where you can find all of the data and information in behind the current Living in Niagara report and the last ones if you want to compare. And the Knowledge Exchange is the tool we're going to focus most on today because it is the tool that is also built on those 12 Living in Niagara sectors, and it has information in there that is in real time and kind of fills in the gaps between the every 3 years where we work together to publish the Living in Niagara report. So I'll just go to the next slide here. So the Niagara Knowledge Exchange is the place that you can go to find those governance resources and professional development opportunities. And the tags, which Sarah is going to talk a little bit more about this in a moment and actually show you how this works. The tags, the words that our knowledge brokers who work in behind the scenes to post the resources to the Knowledge Exchange, the tags that you're going to be looking for are for social profit, governance, finances and funding, marketing, human resources, volunteers. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to show you exactly how that works.
Perfect. Thanks, Mary. So give me 1 second here. So you should be able to see my screen now. And as you'll see, I am on NiagaraKnowledgeExchange.com. And I'm going to show you kind of 3 different ways to access the information on the website. Primarily what we're talking about is professional development opportunities listed on our community calendar and resources and publications in the second area of our site here. So if you're looking for professional development opportunities, if you click on the community calendar, what you'll see is, as the standard default, is a visual representation of dates coming up that have events related to any of the 12 Living in Niagara sectors. However, to kind of fine-tune that and look specifically at for social profit, which would fall under work and employment, under the month name up here, you can sort options and choose a Living in Niagara sector. So if I scroll down to work and employment, it will filter the calendar to now show me dates coming up that have events that are related to work and employment. Keeping in mind that might still be broader than for social profit, but at least starts to fine-tune your search. So you'll see that today, under the calendar lists whatever event is happening on the day you've chosen. So today we've certainly got our webinar. If I jumped ahead to, say, the 27th, I'll see that there is some local hub shared learning sessions, a CIMEE seminar, and a webinar about rethinking evaluation, developing a strategy for the sector by the sector. So any of the events listed, this is kind of an at-a-glance view, but by clicking on the name of the event, it'll pull up the additional information. So as you scroll down, you'll see event details, so a description of the event, how much it costs, where it is, so it's on January 27th, but what time, what's the location, this is a webinar like today, who organized it, and then the Learn More link would take you to the organization's homepage or registration page so that you can get connected to that event. That's one way of finding information specific to those events that are posted on the calendar. You can also, as I scroll down the right-hand side of the page, and Mary talked about this a little bit, we use tags on our site to help link information across the site, across resources, events, projects, and blogs. So as I go down, these are organized not alphabetically, but by those that are most used on our site. So you'll see up at the top here, we have a lot of content on our site with related to mental health, employment, poverty, and right up here is for social profit. So by selecting any of these tags, it'll do a search across the site for the most relevant or most recently added content related to that tag. So by clicking on for social profit, what will come up is a listing of the events, projects, resources, blogs that have been recently added. So though this event was posted on January 19th, the MPI information session, you'd have to go to the event page by clicking on the link there, and it would tell you when the event is actually taking place. But as you scroll down, the little blue bar up here, blue triangle, shows you that these are events coming up. But as I go down, we've got lots of new events that have just been added. As you go down, you'll also see resources and publications and other content types indicated by those triangle colored areas as well. The third way to search on the site, if you're trying to get really specific, is to use our search bar. So I'm going to go actually back to the home page just to show you where it is from there. And our search bar here, this again searches across the entire site. But what you can do, if I type in a search term, for example, finances and funding, if I type it in just on its own, it's going to pull up any content on the site that has the word finances or the words funding, which might be a bit too broad. So by using quotation marks around terms that I want to find, it'll search specifically for those terms. So if I type in for social profit, knowing that all content related to this sector is tagged with for social profit, but if I want to find a second kind of subcategory within that, I use that A&D capitalized, and type in a second term, and then it'll filter out only results that include both of those tags. So for example, if I wanted to find for social profit and governance, and search, what will come up is 19 matches of resources, events, etc. that, as you see, actually down on the bottom here it says tags. This has been tagged with both for social profit and governance. In the same way, I could type in for social profit and training and learning, and that would then help me filter out events that are happening. All for social profit events on the calendar have been tagged with training and learning as well. So you can play around with those tags to kind of help you filter out your search, what you're looking for, and help you get the information you need. In addition, we're very excited to announce, those that are familiar with Niagara Connects know that we've been publishing a bi-monthly newsletter that lets the community know about content that's been added to the Niagara Knowledge Exchange. However, this week we're actually launching our weekly e-blast, recognizing that we are adding content so often to our site, but that by the time we got to the bi-monthly newsletter, we were missing being able to talk about some of these events or resources that were being added. So by moving to a weekly e-blast on Fridays, then those that are signed up for our distribution list receive a short email that just links them to any content on the NKE that's been added within the last week. And as I say, as you can see, we've certainly been adding a lot of content specific to this sector. So if you're interested and you'd like to sign up, at the end of the webinar today, you'll be directed to a short evaluation survey, and from there it'll automatically take you to our sign-up form. So I encourage you to sign up. It's free, and as I say, it saves you having to even go on and search, but it actually puts the content right into your inbox. And on that, we also are always looking for more content. So if you know of resources out there or events happening that you think we should have on the site, please do reach out to us at any time through our contact information and or just through the website. You can submit content through any of the content areas. I'm under Resources and Publications, and you could click here, Submit Your Resource. And please do help share with us. We need to build our library, but we need to rely on the community to help us with that as well. So I'm going to pause there and go back to the main screen. And I'll put up our thank you slide here at the end just to finish off the presentation. We certainly have links there to all of the different tools that we've talked about, in addition to contact information. Gay Douglas's email is listed there as the lead for the Governance Partners program that you heard about today, as well as Joanne's email if you want to talk a little bit further about the grants. But we'll now actually open it up for some discussion time. So I see that we've had a bunch of questions come in, which is awesome, and we'll just start right at the top of those. So feel free to use the chat pod on the left-hand side if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Mary and myself and or Joanne and Liz about any of the content you've heard today. Lynn Chambers has asked, are the 8 of the 13 required governance standards from among Imagine Canada's standards or otherwise?
I'll answer that. Hi, Lynn, even though I can't hear you. Lynn actually is our contact with Imagine Canada. They are pretty close to your standards. We may have just simplified the language because some of the language in the Imagine Canada standards is quite long, so we've just perhaps just simplified the language.
Perfect. And Linda shares not a question but just a comment that in her previous experience with not-for-profit organizations, I can say that the grants and governance standards were all implemented on the boards on which I served. So this is really useful in terms of guidelines to have. Awesome. Great to hear. Thank you, Linda, for sharing that. Stan has asked, is there a term that's recommended for board members? So how long should they be involved as board members? 3 years, 2 years, et cetera? Is there any standard?
There is no standard, and in fact the resource that you will find in the, on our website specifically around terms, actually says that this board should really have a really good discussion about what makes the most sense. Certainly you want a board member, I mean, I'm very familiar with 3-year terms. It gives a board member time to learn, time to then implement, and a number of organizations allow boards to continue into a second term. So whether that's 2 times 2, 3 times 2, 4 times 2, those certainly are things that I'm aware of, but there are some good resource materials to have that conversation about what makes the most sense.
Perfect. Patricia asks, is there an aspect of evaluating if a board is following their policies? Is that regulated in any way or followed up on?
I don't quite understand the question.
So is there any body that comes in and makes sure, like boards could have policies, but how do we know that they're being followed?
No, unless, I mean, what's interesting is, so the Community Foundation was one of the first charities in Canada to go through the Imagine Canada accreditation process. This year it's the 4th year, so we have to go through that process again, and there are checks and balances that we need to send to Imagine Canada that would say, in fact, are we still adhering to that standard, and the board has to sign off on that. We're using the Imagine Canada standards. We don't, I mean, we've explained on our website, perhaps I didn't do as good a job today, is not every charity wants to go through that process, but they are a really good basis, and there's no expectation that a charity needs to go through the Imagine Canada process to become accredited. But we have on our website actually given a link if you want to have a further conversation with Imagine Canada about the process. But what we're finding is it's just a great set of standards that you could choose to implement to make your organization stronger.
Great. Rob asks, is there any thought of a governance standard that would include some determination as to whether the board practices a policy or strategic governance approach as opposed to an operational approach, i.e. getting into the minutiae of the organization and interfering with the work of staff?
It's Liz again. I don't recall that there is, but I mean, as I said, there are an awful lot of standards. I think whether it's a policy board or an operational board, that really needs to be a discussion strongly at the board level with the staff, and then having clear roles and responsibilities would really help to define what type of board and boards also transform, organizations transform. Certainly when the Community Foundation was first started, the board may have been a little bit more operational than it is now. So having clear roles and responsibilities would help that.
Perfect. Kenneth asks, is the professional development on the website for staff or for volunteers? And I can certainly answer that one. I'd say that for the most part it's aimed at staff or boards. However, some of the content would certainly be relevant for volunteers as well. But I'd say that primarily the intention is at the staff or board level. Jane has asked, in terms of capacity building grants, would database development projects be considered?
Hi.
Joe, you can answer that.
Joe, I could answer that. Absolutely. You could contact us at the foundation. We do capacity building grants to help organizations implement new database software or enhance maybe some current database they already have, or it could be for training for new staff or volunteers that are going to be using the database.
And Lynn says, do you know if other community foundations in Canada are considering adopting a similar model?
We're not aware of it. We certainly have shared it with our colleagues, but we are not aware of it at this point. So we're kind of pioneers here, thanks to the Gulf Coast Community Foundation.
Great. And it'll be interesting. Do you have contact with the other foundations in a way that you could share back with them as you work through this model? Yeah, great.
Yep, all the time.
Karen has asked, after completing work at the Center of Excellence, is there a certification or a designation as an agency?
No.
No.
Not at this point.
Never closing the door, right?
Well, it's just more our capacity to be able to enforce that and measure it and monitor it, right?
Absolutely. And Elliot shares, for local entities of national organizations, do the standards require a local board or is the national board sufficient?
That's a great question. So this is all new to us, and actually somebody asked that question yesterday. I believe between the local and the national, the standards should be implemented. So it could be some local, some national.
And certainly I will pause for a second here and prompt that if anyone else listening, participants on the phone, if you have any additional comments about any of these questions that are asked or information that you know about, please do share using the chat pod on the left there and contribute to the conversation as well. Elizabeth has asked, where will we be able to access the 13 governance standards to review?
So
and I think you, sorry, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, it's Jo.
Oh, Jo.
So if you do go to the Niagara Community Foundation website, and the link is charities for charities, and if you go down, if you click on that, you'll get to our grants page, and the 13 governance standards that are on the checklist are there, as well as the resources to support the minimum standards. That document is there as well.
Perfect. And I've just posted the link there in the chat pod for those interested. Tina has asked, the conflict of interest piece is contained in bylaws, but are you saying that it has to be an actual policy as well?
I think either would be fine.
And Janet has asked, what resources are available for boards to evaluate itself, and what kind of format does this take?
So I can answer that. There is actually, as Jo was mentioning, there is a great link to a resource in that document. Dalhousie University has a wonderful board evaluation tool. Community Foundation has been using it for the last 6 or 7 years. So that is certainly one of the resources that's available, and it's quite user-friendly.
Great. And George Kurzweil has provided a comment to this, and it does link to the evaluation question earlier. So he says, my comment regarding the question of boards following their own policies. The more public, the better. So posting policies and board commitments to their website would also help.
That's wonderful.
Absolutely, in terms of accountability. Joy has asked, would a collaborative project that involves several local agencies be eligible for funding?
It's Jo, yes. When there is a collaborative project, a group applying for funding, one organization has to be a registered charity, and they could take the lead on the application, and that's how we would flow the grant. And that organization would take responsibility for the funding as well.
Okay. And Linda says here, sharing, past experience has proved that having a documented conflict of interest policy in the board manual is invaluable. Thank you, Linda. And certainly, just judging by the poll questions we do have a wealth of experience on the line today, so thank you for sharing that. And Joy asks, how would the governance standards be applied to applications for grants if multiple agencies are then working together on a project?
We would ask that the lead on the application complete the governance standards checklist.
Mm-hmm. So it would, in the same way that the money flows through them, they're the primary responsible party.
Exactly, yep.
Gotcha. Perfect. And yeah, I'll pause here. And oh, sorry, Jo, did you have something else to add?
No, with me, it's Liz. We ask everybody's patience as we work through this. It is new for us, and certainly posing additional questions. There's the links there to ask questions, because you think when you develop a program you've got all the answers, and then somebody will ask you a question, you have to think about it. So we just ask your patience and just think of the principles that we are trying to accomplish, and our vision and mission, and what we're trying to accomplish as well.
Great. Thanks for that, Liz. And I'll pause here. Is there anyone that would like to verbally ask any questions? You can do so by pressing *7 to unmute your own line. If you have anything, if you prefer to use your voice instead of your typing fingers. Okay. I'll give, as I'm wrapping up, certainly if anyone has any final questions. There we go. I know there's always one more person that has a question. So Janet has asked, can you explain why Niagara Community Foundation has made a minimum standard as part of the access to grants?
This is Liz. We're doing it because we really believe that we need to have a stronger not-for-profit and charitable sector in Niagara. And by having these 13 minimum standards, or 8 of the 13, is going to move the sector forward to achieve our vision.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, if there's no other questions, then I'd like to say thank you very much today to our presenters for sharing this with us. I was sharing with the presenters earlier that this webinar was our most attended webinar that we've had through Niagara Connects. So obviously there's a lot of interest in the community, and I'm sure that that interest and that passion can only strengthen the work that you're doing together. So thank you for presenting today, and thank you to everyone that joined us on the phone and in the meeting room today. As I said, the resources will be shared via email to you within about a week, including a link to the recording. So please do share with any colleagues who weren't able to join us today. And other than that, when the screen in front of you closes, you will be redirected to 3 short evaluation questions, and then to the link to sign up for our Niagara Connects distribution list if you'd like to do so, and receive invitations for future events like this, as well as our weekly e-blast, kind of rounding up the content that's been added to the Niagara Knowledge Exchange within the past week.
Sarah,
so thank you very Yep.
May I just interject for a second? It's Rennie Piscitelli. I'm chair of the Niagara Connects, and we really appreciate having this for us to be able to listen to this and get all of this information. So thank you very much to Joanne and Mary and Liz.
Thanks, Rennie.
Thanks, Rennie. That's a great way to finish the call. I appreciate that. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody, and I'm sure we'll be talking to everyone soon. Have a great day.